he lost his voice.
Physically or just,
Puberty. He's growing and he lost his voice. So he lost his range. So the record company felt like, okay, this is not a great investment.
And it was at that time that Usher was threatened to be cut from the label. In an interview that Usher did about 10 years later with the Rolling Stone, he describes how he was feeling at that time. The article says he was confused and angry, and he even punched a wall one night. Usher is quoted as saying, "How can you embrace me and then all of a sudden you don't even want to return my phone calls?" He said, "The night I hit that wall was intense. I took off for 30 minutes, non-stop, 5 in the morning, running. He literally tried to escape. Finally, all out of breath, I thought, you know what? I don't care what they think. I'm gonna win." So he begged L.A. Reid to stay on the label, and he was determined to make it work. And this part's just my opinion, but it is kind of confusing and unexplainable to me that somebody like L.A. Reid, who is already such an established name in the business, would even sign somebody who's like in the 12 to 13-year-old range and not know for a fact that their voice was about to change, but I digress. They had little 13-year-old Usher good and scared, cortisol levels through the roof, threatened him with taking away his spot on the label for something he could not even control, like his voice changing and getting acne.
Album won the hearts of record producers. The Fall from Grace experience set the standard for Janetta Patton on what it would take to keep her son in a competitive position in the record industry.
And he basically didn't have a choice. L.A. Reid presented him with one option to stay on the label, and that involved going to attend a finishing school of sorts known as Puffy Flavor Camp.
I moved to New York City. And I lived with Sean Puffy Combs for a year.
That's the crazy thing. Now, that was L.A. Reid's idea, right? We're sending you over to something called Puffy Flavor Camp.
There you go.
To learn
Flavor Camp?
Yeah,
Flavor
that's
Camp.
what it was called. And you're going to go to Puff Daddy's.
And this is where my conspiracy theory comes in. I think this was much more than a mentor. Remember last week's episode about the Backstreet Boys, where a 13-year-old Nick Carter's parents allegedly signed over guardianship rights to a then 18-year-old Brian Littrell? Well, I think that's what's going on here. I mean, think about it. If he's 13 years old and he's getting sent across state lines to live with someone else, wouldn't they have to legally have a guardianship over him? Plus, on top of that, P. Diddy himself has actually said that he was indeed Usher's legal guardian.
I have been given custody of him. He signed to Usher.
I'm signed to Usher.
I had legal guardianship of Usher when he did his first album. I did Usher's first album. I don't have legal guardianship of him, but for the next 48 hours, he's with me.
I'm going crazy.
Crazy.
Now, I did try to look up the court documents for that guardianship, and if it was anywhere, it probably would have been in New York. I was not able to get the documents. I would have to FOIA request them, and I just needed to get this video out. Now, this part is really particularly weird to me because P. Diddy, Puff Daddy Combs, was not on LaFace Records. He was not on that record label. He was not signed to it. And in 1994, which I believe is the same exact year that Usher did sign to LaFace Records, that was the same year that Sean P. Diddy, Puff Daddy Combs started his own record company called Bad Boy Records or Bad Boy Entertainment. And that record label is a big deal. Today, there's artists like Machine Gun Kelly or whatever on there, but the notorious B.I.G. Biggie Smalls actually released his debut album with Bad Boy Records, Sean P. Diddy, Puff Daddy Combs. And I mean, I guess we could do a whole video on him. I don't want to get off in the weeds there, but P. Diddy himself was only like 21 years old. So why would a 21-year-old with his own record label be running a flavor camp for a teenage boy in his last straw for another different record label? It's just very weird and unexplainable to me that they would get Usher all worked up, cortisol through the roof. He's talking about punching walls and running and driving and doing all this stuff. And it's over something that's completely predictable. His voice is going to change. He is a young man. That is how it works. So they get him all riled up, all cortisol through the roof, like I said. And then they're like, okay, well, I guess if you want to go to Flavor Camp. And my camp sirens are already going off because in last week's video, we did talk about Lou Pearlman having his finishing school for boys called, what was his called? The O-Town Camp or whatever. It was basically a camp that he was putting not only the Backstreet Boys through, but also NSYNC, the other bands that he did manage. O-Town, we saw it on Making the Band, and then Lou Pearlman handed off Making the Band to P. Diddy. I don't really know why people are handing stuff off to P. Diddy. I do not know why a teenage Usher would have went across state lines, and then we have him talking about a guardianship. We'll get into all that in a minute. So it's very confusing to me why AJ Richardson would have scouted this man, then passed him off to L.A. Reid's brother, then L.A. Reid's brother decides to audition him for L.A. Reid, and then L.A. Reid signs him to his record label and then ships him off across state lines to P. Diddy Puff Daddy Puffy Flavor Camp at 13 years old? Why? Now, in addition to the things that Usher himself has said about this flavor camp and about this time period of his life, his mom has also spoken about this time in interviews, and one was a few years ago. She said she remembers the conversation that she did have with Puffy before she allowed Usher to leave. She said basically it was a business decision, and he looked at her and he told her, "You're gonna have to trust me."
And I always say, stay with your kid. I don't care what they say, because they tried to push me out. They didn't want me in. They would actually say, you're too close to the project. No, I'm not. Because remember, Usher went to stay with Puffy. Now that was a business decision right there, because I didn't know Puffy. I didn't know him. So Puffy was there, and I will never forget it. We had this conversation and he said, "You're going to have to trust me."
And for years, rumors have circulated about this mentorship of sorts. And we're not even going to be able to play all the clips here, but you might have seen Usher in recent years kind of reminiscing on this flavor camp time of his life, and he does not remember it fondly.
Everybody needs a mentor. Who you choose to invest in as that mentor is really up to who you see yourself being. Because as a result of being around that man, Sean Puffy Combs, I don't sleep to this day. I have a problem sleeping to this day. I got it from him.
Jodeci, Mary J. Blige, they didn't know nothing about this shit.
Oh.
I was having a good time, you know what I mean?
Where was Usher's mother while her teenage son was allegedly sharing a bed with a grown man?
With the record company, I'm just not trusting them at all. They still don't want me involved because they feel like mothers are too connected and they cannot separate. I knew how to separate, but with them, I see deception over here, deception over there.
About a decade after this whole flavor camp incident, Usher would describe this period of time in his life as the, quote, hardest days of his life. In a 2004 feature with Rolling Stone, Usher says that he had a bandage on his hand in 1994 when he arrived in New York, where L.A. Reid had sent him to, quote, craft an image and album with Puff Daddy. At 13 years old, he was the youngest of Puff Daddy's bad boy posse, which immediately earned Usher the nickname Baby Huey. And he said he had to grow up really fast, spending time around Puff Daddy in his New York recording studio that was called Daddy's house. It's just weird. Anyway, Usher described the whole lifestyle in New York as highly sexual. He told the interviewer in that 2004 Rolling Stone piece that, quote, Puff introduced me to a totally different set of sex specifically. Sex is so hot in the industry, man. Usher went on to say that he would open a door and be confronted with several people in a room having a good time. He goes on to say, you never knew what was going to happen. And there have been other people who have discussed Usher being around a pretty wild and frankly inappropriate scene for a child.
Ed Lover even once recalled a time when he went to the club and Usher was drinking himself crazy.
And I look to my right and there's a kid standing there drinking champagne.
Oh no.
And I couldn't help but wonder who the hell let their child come into this club, stand in the VIP section, and drink champagne. I mean, guzzling champagne out the bottle.
But as usual, I do not know what took place. I was not there, and I am not making any allegations. Everybody is innocent until proven guilty, in my opinion, so that's all I really wanted to say about that.
Like, I really admire R. Kelly.
In any event, Usher did eventually put out his first album at the age of 16 years old, and it was co-executive produced by Puff Daddy and L.A. Reid.
I'm so good all the time I think of you. Holding on to someone new. Don't make me lose my mind. Seems like I've been here before. Baby, I can't take no more of you trying to play me out.
Yo, come on, get up, man.
Now, when that album did originally sort of debut, people did have a little bit of a problem with it. It received a lot of criticism because Usher was only like 14 to 15 years old when he started recording this album, and it dealt with some pretty adult themes.
Let me take off all your clothes. Let me think I like to you.
The criticism at the time was it wasn't believable because Usher was so young, and him singing about that stuff, like there's no way he knows what that means and things like that, which I think is a little bit of a strange criticism. It should have been he's too young to know what that means and he's too young to be singing about that, but they were just saying, oh, we don't believe him because he's young.
This time I sort of took a little step on the wild side. I mean, as you know, as far as me being an explicit, artist, that's not me. But actually, I put Lil' Kim on my album, and she has, sort of a little provocative thing going. She's sort of, in the tabloids for being a bad girl.
Right.
So, tell me about this, this little veg you got floating out on the stage. You know what I'm saying? I don't know. We may freak them by the end of the tour. I'll come out. I'll be on the bottom. He'll be on the top. I mean, that's just another side of me.
But when you're criticized for that, I read where you said it's not a provocative album necessarily or vulgar. Yeah. It's just that you're explaining how it is for a young man to be coming of age or to be coming into his manhood.
In a way to come of age. Actually, just something that some of my age goes through. And I mean, there's plenty of people out there who can relate to the same thing. And that's how I write my music. As a writer, that's what Babyface told me. It's best to write what you can relate to. So when you sing,
personal experience,
you can get to it. But as far as it being an explicit album, they have a clean version. So.
You know what? I think when I'm on the stage, am I being a little bit too sexy, a little bit too explicit? I can only be who I am, you know what I mean? I ask that you don't take it wrong. I just really have love, passion for my music.
Which actually turned out to be an incorrect reason to criticize him, because we do know that at the time he was basically surrounded by sex and sexual situations and scenarios, so...
In the 90s, do you understand what that's like?
Puffy's place was like just filled with chicks and orgying like nonstop, right?
No, not really. I mean, but hey, it was curious. I got a chance to see some things.
Yeah, but you were 13. What were you seeing?
I went there to see the lifestyle,
right?
And I saw it, and it was, but I don't know if I could indulge and understand what I was even looking at. It was pretty wild.
So nobody tried to, some woman didn't come along.
I didn't say that.
Okay.
I didn't say that. What I did say is that there were very curious things taking place, and I didn't necessarily understand it.
Biggie Smalls was there.
Biggie Smalls was there. Lil' Kim, Craig Mack.
All these people are hanging.
How I feel? I was so mesmerized. I don't even know what you're talking about.
Just like, can you stay up till 4 a.m. with them and party?
I mean, I could. I actually stayed up longer than them.
I was just so blown away by the stamina.
And what do you have money? What's going on?
I mean, I had like per diem. I had like,
what
like a living.
Life.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy.
14 years old.
In any event, it was a commercial success, and Usher himself in 2004 basically ended up single-handedly saving Arista Records, the one that was run by Clive Davis, because he had ended up being adopted on as like a jive star. It was a whole thing. But the long story short of this section is something y'all already know. Usher had a profoundly successful career, but it didn't take very long before he also started experiencing some personal life issues. He had a series of high-profile relationships,
but I just can't seem to find that one just right for me.
So do you want to go out with me or what?
Yeah. As far as Brandy, I think it's real cute that people think we date.
What's up with that?
If I take a picture with her, they think that we're dating, so I just leave it up to y'all. If you say so.
One with a woman who is 7 years older than him, another famous singer, Chili from TLC.
Dating these days, who's the girlfriend?
Rosanda Chili Thomas of TLC.
No kidding, TLC, Chili.
Last time you co-hosted with me, Chili called you on the cell phone.
Right.
Do you remember that? In the middle of the show, the cell phone starts ringing. It's Chili, like, what are you doing?
Well, we keep looking at each other.
Co-hosting. I gotta go.
She's watching right now.
How'd you meet Chili?
Well, you know what? Oddly, we were always around each other. I was signed to LaFace Records in Atlanta, Georgia, and we'd always pass each other in
Since
work.
you were kids, right?
Yeah, and I'd always admired her as a child. Every time we would go on a vacation or something like that, when LaFace Records would take us on a vacation, we'd always end up together dancing or something. We got into a spitball fight in the Bahamas.
Real kid stuff.
Yeah, really fun stuff. Yeah. And I never imagined that someone so close to me could mean so much.
Well, so then what's the turning point here, Usher?
Well, I mean...
Now suddenly she's grown up and you took a second...
Well, suddenly I grew up and she took a second.
But all that success was also met with challenges.
Remember, there were 3 other people that sued Usher for exposing them to herpes.
Hit you with the kiss. I ain't big game there. Come here.
Quantasia Sharpton.
It was just after my 19th birthday. He never warned me about any STDs.
One such challenge would come in 2010 whenever Usher and his mom had just had so many disagreements over the years professionally that they decided to part ways professionally. Now, she had managed his career as his momager for 17 years. She had managed him, like I said, since he was basically 9 years old. Now, for Usher's side of the story, he says that he just kind of wanted his mom to let him be a man and let him grow up.
You fired her? How do you go about firing your mom?
Well, actually, I didn't fire her. What happened was there was a difference in opinion. In any business relationship there will be. We begin to kind of grow apart in our theory. For the most part, I felt like this would be great for us. And I really want her to be supportive of the man, Usher.
Janetta's side of the story is, she was the person that really made the magic happen. She did her job.
I did my job. People judged me by the way I did my job, but I protected my son and my artists. I knew when to be the mother and I knew when to be the manager. And because I had his back 100%. So, I expected, people to think, oh, she's difficult. No, I'm not really difficult. I'm just doing what's best.
You like being behind the scenes?
I really do. Now, I really do not like being out front. I am the person that makes the magic happen.
But long story short, they do both agree that the parting of ways or the firing had something to do with letting Usher spread his own wings and fly as an adult man beyond just being an artist, but he wanted to venture into other stuff. But as early as 2004, there were inklings of this strained dynamic. In that same 2004 feature for Rolling Stone, the author gave some insight into the types of disagreements that Usher and his mom were having. Even by then, apparently, she had scheduled him for some type of awards show appearance, but he did not want to go. The interviewer describes the confrontation. Usher confronted his mom, Janetta, on the phone while the Rolling Stone interviewer was in the car with them. He said, quote, "You didn't even consult me. I'm not doing it, dog. I'm not going to be a part of your madness. You're playing this like a game and you just lost a round. You're not thinking of what's good for Usher. Strategic moves, deliberate movement. I'm not going to do it. I'm just not going to do it. I'm going to talk to you later." And then he hung up the phone.